there's one thing that you can do today as a business owner is know what those numbers are. Just know what the gross profitability is, what that percentage is that you get to keep off of each product or service that you provide. Just by knowing that, you can make some different decisions within the business.
Hey Tanner, great to see you again for another week of, I know we're going to learn about something really cool this week. I'm excited to dive in and, I'd love to hear kind of what you've got in mind for 5 ways.
Yeah. So building upon what we talked about last week. So if you haven't already listened to or watched the video from last week, highly encourage you go back through it. I'm going to highlight what it is we talked about, but I'm not going to go super deep like we did on the front end of the conversation last week. But we have this thing called the 5 ways. And the 5 ways is kind of how we break out generating more profit within a business, really a formula. So that formula looks like this. I'll put it up for those that are watching the video version that can see it. Throw that up there and then we'll talk through it really quickly. But essentially it's, when I talk to most business owners, they can tell me how many customers or clients they have, maybe how much revenue they have, and if there was any profitability. But the reality is these are the results, right? We can't just go and get more profit. There's things that kind of precede that. So how this essentially works is in order to get more customers, it's really a function of the number of leads that we have times the conversion rate. That gets us to customers. Revenue is essentially the number of customers we have times how often they buy from us, which is our number of transactions, times how much they spend on average, which is our average dollar sale. That was our topic for last week. And that gets us to revenue, or the sales within the business. And of course, profitability is the difference between what we spend and what we make, which is really our profit margins, which is kind of that last component. So revenue times our profit margins gets us to profit. So that's very high level stuff. But kind of what we're doing these next few weeks is digging into one of these specific topics and saying, how do we move this number? Like, what can we do? How do we do that? So we spent all of last week talking about average dollar sale. How do we increase that? Had a lot of fun discussion on it. So really we get to talk about a new one today. And the topic that came up that we're talking about was really the first one that we should go after if we're looking to make some movement within this formula, and that's profit margins.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I'm excited to dive in about profit margins because I think there's ways that like I may not know what really it all like the holistic view of a profit margins. We hear the word, we may have an idea of what it is or have some ideas, but we may not know what really we can do to drive it to grow it.
Exactly. So I'm going to try and break this down and make it as easy as I possibly can for the audience, especially if you haven't been really thinking about margins or profit margins in the past. The way that we tend to talk about it here in this context is sales to profit. So we're talking like, what's the margin in the entire business? Meaning, here's what I make, here's how many sales I made, here's what I make at the end of the day once all expenses are paid. The percentage difference between those is profit margin. So it's a way to express the amount of your sales that is going to profit versus the amount of sales percentage-wise that's going to your expenses. Now, expenses could be variable costs. So some businesses listening may have cost of goods or cost of services. Think of the manufacturer that has to buy materials in order to sell it. That's a cost of good. Other service-based or professional services may not have as much in cost of goods, but they will still have overheads, right? Employee time, rent or lease for your building, internet, and the list goes on and on of the different things that we expense within the business. So profit margins is really just the percentage that's left. That's the simplest way to think about it. Now we can look at profit margins by product line, right? So I go back to that manufacturer. So let's say it's a manufacturer that's building, I don't know, pick something, a widget, any type of widget, right? And they've got two different widgets and they both sell for $20. One of them has material cost of $10. The other has a material cost of $5. The one that has a material cost of $5 is making $15 in gross profit, while the other one's only making $10 in gross profit. So you sell them for the same, but the cost of materials is a little bit different. So you've got different gross profits. That's another way to kind of think about this profit margin thing, which leads to one of our topics today is sell more of the one that has the greater margin, that you make more off of, the more you get to keep, right? So that's a hopefully simplistic way to kind of be thinking about profit margin. What that means, it really is no more complex than the percentage of dollars that you get to keep from each of the sales that you make.
See, that's just like a light bulb moment because you think about it and like when we really analyze what does it cost to make something? that can help us determine, which one to go with, especially like you say, of products. I used to have a t-shirt company. Great
Hmm.
model for this. Like, are we going to go with the premium, ultra wash 3 times cotton with a blend of something, or are we going to go with something more basic? And it's like, depending on what kind of design we want to put on it would maybe determine it what one we're going to go with. Like, can we sell this at maybe a higher mark to kind of make up some of those costs? Like, how can we work with that? And it's really about getting in there, learning your numbers, and learning how, like, you can play with your numbers. You can really get creative and find the best fit.
Yeah. And, especially in those types of situations, like if there's one thing that you can do today as a business owner is know what those numbers are. Just know what the gross profitability is, what that percentage is that you get to keep off of each product or service that you provide. Just by knowing that, you can make some different decisions within the business. If you're selling 3 or 4 different t-shirts, know which ones have how much do you keep off of each one of them? Now, if you're selling, see if I can do quick math in my head, but let's say you're selling a t-shirt for $30 and that $30 t-shirt has a 50% cost of material. So you get to keep $15 of it. But then you sell another one for $20 and that one may only have let's actually take it down and say I'm selling a t-shirt for $15 now. So you a little bit lower, but the cost is still only, I don't know, 50%. Or maybe it's a little less than 50%. I'm not going to be, let's say it's 33%. I'm trying to think of easy numbers I can do off my head. So let's say it's 33%. So it looks better and you make essentially, you know, 2/3 of it. So that means you make $10, right? So you sell it for 15, it has $5 of cost, you get to keep $10 of it. On that other one, you sold for $30, it had a 50% profit margin on it, which means you kept 15. So now which one's better?
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
So one had the better profit margin overall,
Mhm.
but the other one actually nets you more money if you can sell at that volume. So, not saying that one is right or wrong, but it's important to kind of look at these things and say, well, can I do more volume of the lower one? Can we get more of that and be able to do that at a much higher rate than we can with the higher ones? Or is it easier to sell the $30 one because they're nicer and people want those? And yes, the margins are not quite as good, but I actually make more on each one. You got to kind of look at that from a business model, but we can't make that decision unless you know what those numbers are.
Yeah, that is huge. It's like crucial to just really crunch the numbers, really understand them, and take the time, whether it's yourself or with your team. Sometimes if you have someone on your team that has that really is really savvy with numbers and things like that, I think that's super, super helpful. Yeah, it's really interesting to see all the moving parts and how you can work with them.
Yeah, and I know there's some of you folks that are listening to like that's too much for me, or I'm in a more of a service or professional service type thing. It's like, well, Tanner, I don't really have tons of cost of materials or things like that. How does this relate to me? And when we think about profit margins, at least from this broad context, if we're going to go into here's how we do different things from a margin perspective, I think it's important to look at it from I make this much in sales. This is how much I keep at the end of the month or at the end of the year. What are all the things I can do in between? Like if we think of profit margins from that perspective, I think there's a lot of things we can get into.
Hmm.
One of my favorites, although it's insanely painful, can be insanely painful. I only say that because I've gone through it and it was painful for us. But taking a minute and actually looking at everything that's on your P&L, your profit and loss statement. Look at every single expense and have to justify every single one. Like, why are we spending $10 on this? Why are we spending $300 on this? Like, literally go line by line with every single expense and determine, does it make the business better or not? Is it something we need in this business or not? Simply by going through that exercise, you may find a few things that we threw it in because we could, but it really has no utility or no value. And if I take it out, I get to keep more at the end of the day.
That is huge too. And that's like where, I bring up the question too is how do I start small, not get overwhelmed with this? Because I know it can be a lot as a business owner. How do I just simply get started with doing these things?
That would be probably the first step is taking a look at that. Then as you get into it, you can start looking at, well, what are some other things that we can do? And when we sit down, we work with clients. We're like, all right, we're going to walk through each of these 5 ways or each of these 5 areas within the business. What's 1 or 2 things that we can implement over the next month, and let's work on those things. So that's usually one of the first ones. One of the easiest ways is, in this profit margin column, more often than not, it's just decisions that have to be made. It's less on, I got to spend money to do X, Y, and Z. There may be some that could require that, making the investment up front. But generally speaking, it tends to be, I just got to make some decisions based on what's out here. So looking at everything on the list and being able to say, can I justify it all? That's an easy one. Easy to do. Psychologically, there may be some additional components that come up.
Prepare yourself.
Exactly, right? So one of the other ones that we can look at is renegotiating with suppliers. So if you think about, I've got, long-term contracts or connections with different vendors or suppliers out there, especially you think of different manufacturers, things like that. If you're in more of a business that does have a lot of cost of goods, things like that, going in and having a conversation with them, say, hey, we've been doing business for a while. What does that look like to keep our business? Are there different negotiations, right? There's different tactics you can get into with this, but at least looking at every single one of your contracts and saying, how do I have a conversation with the vendor and look at potentially some more favorable terms, right? One of the easiest ways to think about this is if you're going to be doing a lot of volume, and you've got the sales coming in, things like that, it may make sense to be able to buy more, buy in bulk to get a discount. You could do that within your own business and say, hey, I'm going to buy 3 months worth instead of 1 month worth, and I'd like a 20% discount if I buy all of that up front. Some vendors will be like, yeah, that's a great idea. So you just cut your cost by 20%. Now, if you can go get a line of credit for, let's call it 10% annually, right? Annual interest on this. You have 10% annual interest. Well, let's call it 12%. Let's make it easy. Let's call it 12% annual interest. You're only going to pay 1% of the money that you borrow each month. So over 3 months, you're only paying up to 3% in interest, but you save 20% overall. You're netting a 17% arbitrage there. So that's one way to do it. Simpler way, or potentially similar way, is find others that need to buy the same things you do and create a group. If there's 5 businesses that all need to buy the same materials, buy them in bulk and split the cost between all of them, because you're able to get a discount on the total because you're buying in bulk versus not, right? It's kind of creating buying groups is what that's called.
I have done that before. Yes, I will find someone, say I have to go on an order that is a little bit more upfront because you're buying in bulk. I'll say, hey, would you like to split this with me? And that's the great way to do it. And then you both win and you both can, get what you need. Maybe you don't need as much, but yeah, you can share that, and then that can make it a little bit more easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a really clean example of this. A little while back, we had been sending out what we call our WOW kits. It was this actual kit, a physical box. We put a book and some brochures and kind of different little tchotchkes and all that kind of stuff in it. And we'd send it out in part of our sales process so that people would actually get something tangible, kind of a cool little thing. And the global office for Action Coach as a franchise, would create these little things, and then you could buy them from them, and then we could use them in our own business. And the more you bought, the lower the price was. So, okay, well, we don't need 50 of them at a time. That's just a lot, and that's a lot of upfront, capital to have in just technically inventory. Well, there's other coaches around the state, there's other coaches around, the country, and being able to say, hey, we're going to place an order. How many do you need? Because if we do it in one shot and there's 5 coaches that are all buying, 10 of them, now we've got an order of 50 that decrease the overall cost, which then as you split it out between everybody, the cost per each individual unit was lower. So our costs went down because we came together as a group and said, we all need the same thing. How do we just create a group around it so we can get the bulk discount? That
makes so much sense. And I know what you mean, because some of those things you only need a handful of, like lanyards is one, but you have to buy a huge amount to make it worth it. Otherwise, they're $60 a lanyard. That's where I ran into it, was little products that you just need, but how can you maybe work with other coaches, work with other companies that share a similar need or something like that. So I think that's a really cool concept.
Yeah, 100%. So, it's really cool to I'm looking down at my little sheet here, and there's 67 different things that we could do to actually improve profit margins, which we're not going to get into all 67 of them here today, but it goes to show like we've touched on two, I think, maybe two. And those are two things that most people can implement somewhere within the business. So let's go through just a couple more and see if there's any that resonate or things that, okay, maybe you've done in your business or things you're like, I want to try that. How would I implement it? Maybe we can get into some discussion there. So another one that I highlight because it's another one that's easy and simple, but maybe has some emotional ties to it. Maybe in a good way, maybe not. But it's essentially firing your C and D grade clients or customers. Which, what does that mean? Like, let's define that first, right? Because I've had a few people like, what does that mean to fire your C and D grade clients? So if we were to create a list of all of our clients or all of our customers, people that have done business with us in the past, and we ranked them, like who are our A level clients, the people that we want to do business with all the time. They pay their bills either on time or even in advance. They're easy to deal with. They don't take a whole lot of time to fulfill. They're just amazing to be around. Like these are the people that we love, right? That's our A level customers or clients. B, we kind of call those the basic clients. They're usually pretty good, pay their bills on time. There's really not much else to it. Like they're kind of that middle of the road for us.
Yeah.
C's then are what we call can't deal with. Like these are the ones that always have the challenges that they bring up. It's I'm gonna complain about every little thing that I possibly can within your service or your product because I want to know everything I get for every little piece that I put in, right? And they're just difficult to deal with, right? We call these the C's, or the can't deal with. And then D's are your like dead clients. They're just the ones that are just like, oh, you shouldn't even come in. You're the lowest kind of 10% of the business. So we know that a lot of the time, energy, and effort can get sucked up with these C and D level clients. So being able to just fire them, say, hey, you know what? You're not a fit for us, but I happen to know somebody who'd be great to send you over, right? This is where you actually give business to your competitors. Now, some of you may be going, oh, that's mean. Why would you give them your worst customers? Because my D or C level clients may be an A client for somebody else. That's a fit type of a thing, not necessarily anything to do with the actual customer. It just may not have been a fit for us, but it might have been a fit for somebody else. So it's not always a bad thing, which is why it's good to have partners that are also in the same industry as you. It's like, it's not always a bad thing. You're not competitors in every sense of the word, but being able to shift them off to somewhere that they're going to do better, which frees you a bunch of time that's not being sunk into them. So there's cost savings, or you can start putting that back into those that actually pay you and spend more with you on a regular basis.
Oh, that's a really good one. And that's something we often like kind of miss. We just kind of get into the flow, work with our clients, take them wherever they're at. And sometimes, yeah, it's good to lighten the load. And again, yeah, it might be a good fit for somebody else. Maybe that's all that the problem is just it's not a fit, and that's okay. We're not for everyone, but I always say we can be for anyone, but we're not for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay to do that too. It's from a marketing perspective, we usually recommend that you really start taking a look at your A and B grade clients and who that really is. And knowing that there's going to be some out there that are just going to be fit for somebody else, right? We're in the coaching business. There's several clients that we've passed along and vice versa. We've received some that just weren't a fit for somebody else. And that's okay, right? It's important to recognize that because it really is a best fit for everybody involved. Now, yes, there are also the few folks out there that are just a pain in the butt no matter what. And sometimes it's better to cut ties with them than it is to try and please everybody.
Definitely. That is a good one because that doesn't not only helps your profit margin within your business, that helps your profit margin, your bandwidth, the energy you're pouring into who you're pouring into. So even beyond the numbers, it helps with other bandwidths as well.
So let's maybe pick one more to kind of dig into, and then we can open it up if you've got any additional questions or how you might implement it within your business. But let's see. Let's choose what's another good one that most people can do. Let's talk about terms, payment terms. I think that's probably a good one to pay attention to. And I think I've seen more businesses that this isn't as much of an issue as it might have been before, and depending on who your target market is. I can give some examples of different situations, but if you're consistently having accounts receivable in the 30, 40, 60-day range, because you allow, I'm going to give you an invoice today and you don't have to pay it for 30 days, right? Shortening that time frame is a really good way to be able to increase our profit margins. And it's really the speed of capturing cash that leads to that function. So I'm a big fan of like due upon receipt or due within like 3 days.
Hmm.
For a handful of businesses out there, 7-day terms are probably okay. Start getting beyond that. Recommendation is bring that back a little bit, right? We always joke that most of us start a business. Most of us are not in the financial services industry. In other words, we did not get in business to be a bank. So if we're not a bank, why are we giving payment terms to people? Like, we didn't choose to allow them to put stuff on credit with us. If you think about it from that context, it makes sense to shorten those terms wherever possible. There are some industries where that's a little bit harder to do. We've got a few clients that are in the local government space. In other words, a lot of their businesses are local municipalities, schools, different things like that, right? Being able to get a 7-day term on those, almost impossible to do, right?
Yes.
You're dealing with a very different target market there. So it's really, how do you manage the shortness of it as much as possible? Like, don't allow that to go 90 days, but if you can get it to 30 to 45 days, even that's going to help at least a little bit. So I'm always going to recommend going shorter, but paying attention to that. Now, on the flip side, it sounds a little contrary to the same conversation, but helps us as the business owner, is if you can increase your payable time. So now on the other end of the spectrum, if you can ask for longer terms, because you've got a vendor or supplier that will allow you longer terms, you can actually shorten your cash gap by collecting cash faster, but it doesn't require you to pay it out as much, right? So it's the difference between, I pay for everything on a debit card and I just shifted over to a credit card so I don't have to pay for it for 30 days. Still going to pay it off. It just gives me 30 days to capture more cash in, right? This helps with that cash flow cycle within a business.
Two things came up when you talked about those. One was, yes, I was doing events with a corporate hospitality, and I remember in that experience, the payout was, it was like 90 days, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was challenging because I had to pay my artists much sooner. And so that's when I really learned about, okay, if I case, I need to at least communicate with my artists that this is the case, and if they sign up on get on board with it, understanding that, then they'll be like, okay, this is coming in and I'm okay with this. So I think that was like a huge learning curve for me, was like knowing that cycle and communicating with the people involved, my vendors, which are like my artists, to make sure that they are aware.
Yeah. So when you look at this, we can get super technical and in the weeds, or we can keep pretty surface level. So for most that are listening, probably the more surface level understanding of, let's just try and get cash faster, and let's set some standards in place that doesn't allow the those payment terms to go a little too long. Which, just is, if you've ever done that, it's a little bit more painful in terms of managing cash flow. That's kind of the simplistic version. Probably not a conversation for today, but we can get into cost of capital and drawing on lines of credit and opportunity cost of the money that you have. If you're able to capture it faster, you can either do cash financing for your own stuff, versus, like, if I don't get things for 60 days, I might need some lines of credit from banks where it can help bridge the gap at different times. Now I'm paying interest on it, so I have more expense. So there is a deeper layer to that one that, depending on the business and your size and scope, things like that, we might need to get a little bit deeper into. But generally speaking, the faster you can get cash in, the better it is overall in terms of your profit margins and things like that.
Definitely, this has been like super educational, and I think it just like we're just touching the surface of all the multiple ways that we could improve our profit margins, and this is great to just give folks that that let's start looking at this. Let's get curious about it. I think curiosity is a great way to get started if that's something you haven't done before. And not fearing it, but looking at, when you know your numbers and you know what's going on, that's where you can play. Then you can get creative, you can find solutions, and of course, working with a trusted mentor or coach to get through that is definitely also a great way to tackle that hairy, audacious goal.
Yes. And I'm going to throw this one out there. I don't think we mentioned it last week. We know that as we go through these details, there will be some of you that's like, that's great, I'm going to go implement it, and others that go, that's great, I don't know how to implement it, or you mentioned one, or is there other things like how do I navigate this? And one of the things that for our listeners, specifically for our listeners, we're going to offer you all something very special today, and we'll keep this open for the next couple of episodes as we go through lead gen, conversion rate, and number of transactions as well. But for our listeners, if you are interested in how do I take this next step, we're going to give you 2 weeks of free coaching. Now, we'll put the link in the description below so you can kind of see what does that look like. How does that feel? What do I expect throughout that? But it's going to take you through a lot of this stuff as we go through those 2 free weeks. It's going to give you more than 4 meetings with us. But that's kind of our gift back to our listeners to say thank you. So take a look at that. Everything will be in the description below, but we want to give you the tools to be able to really navigate through this process and start to increase that profitability. So 2 weeks of free coaching. It's our gift back to you.
And as someone who's been in this coaching, it has been a game changer for my business because I am not a numbers girl. I am a people person, creative, and it's really helped me to strategize, just getting creative with my numbers and like really keeping that top of mind. So highly recommend. You're getting some freebies, guys. Let's go. I love a
Awesome. Well, we'll be back next week. Okay, we'll get together and talk a little bit about which one we want to do next. But conversion rate, number of transactions, and lead generation opportunities are kind of the 3 that we have yet to tackle. So if you're listening, stay subscribed, stay tuned, and we'll be back with a little bit more content here in the next couple of weeks.